Well, welcome to Climate Courage. My name's Andrea Edwards, and today I'm joined by the very, very lovely Bhavani Periasmi. Did I say it right this time?
Yes, you did, Andrea.
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much for agreeing to join me today because um, I wanted to do this, but I didn't want to do it by myself. And you've translated the Malay version of this, which I'm going to publish soon. And I think you'll probably know where I am more than just about anyone. So, but you've been doing loads of stuff in the last few months. So, do you want to just give everyone an update of what you're doing and the books you've been part of as well?
I co-authored a book with five other awesome ladies, and then I came up with a reflecting journal on my own, and a little bit away from weather, more to human. I started doing some work on psycho-oncological coaching, specifically for cancer coaching. Not sure
Wow.
where that's gonna take me, but yeah, that's what I've been up to.
Yeah. And your gratitude journal is beautiful, and of course, you're a gratitude coach. Do you want to just explain what that's all about?
Yeah, because I think the challenge that people always come to me and say is, I don't know what to write. And when you say, be go on a journey of writing your diary, or just write what you're grateful for, so people come to a stop when I can't think of any more things. The five things every day is getting bored. So I started
Mm.
writing on WhatsApp, sending five questions or six questions, and it got exhausting at one point, and I said, why don't I just do a journal and let people just do. You know what, and just something very interesting came up. I have friends who have little kids who can't even read and write, but when they read the topics to them, the kids actually draw out what they want to say they
Ah,
are grateful for. So I've got surprising feedbacks about the journal.
oh, nice. That's beautiful. What a great way to do it. Maybe
Never
there's a
thought of
second edition.
kids version, right? Yep,
Yeah,
thinking about it.
yeah, nice, awesome. All right, so we're here today to talk about getting prepared for extreme heat. Uh, this is something I'm incredibly concerned about because I'm not seeing any of the action that aligns to the thinking of what needs to happen. I know Singapore is going to release some government guidelines for the country for people to get prepared, but really across the global south, where my biggest concern lies as we head towards this El Nino ramping up in power. From next February onwards, we're going to be potentially seeing heat that we've never seen before, and the majority of infrastructure in this region, right across the global south, is not prepared for extreme heat. I shared a picture the other day of a new workers sort of building being built, and it's just basically metal, and that's just an oven if the temperature gets really high. So we've got a lot to do. We've got a lot to get prepared for, and we've got to think about it. But let's just start off, just with an overview of where we are with extreme heat. So Bhavani's in Malaysia and I'm in Thailand. In April, we experienced wet bulb temperatures for the first time. And that means when the heat index moves into unlivable territory. This heat hit Malaysia, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, and the Philippines for the very first time, and many deaths were reported. All countries in the global south, as I said, are not ready for these heat extremes, and seeing what has happened in the northern hemisphere this past summer, it means we need to get ready for the next round of heat, which is going to be worse than what we've already experienced this year. We've also got to understand that all indications are pointing towards much more extreme heat over the coming months, especially as El Nino gets stronger and starts to do its job. Beyond Asia, so just this week, Brazil is experiencing 45 degrees Celsius. This is on their last day of winter, and it's the highest temperature ever recorded in the country, not just for winter, but for the entire year. Australia is sort of moving into overdrive, so they saw record heat in September this week, with temperatures in New South Wales 10 to 15 degrees Celsius above normal for that time of year. Now, if those averages happen over the summer months, we could be looking at 50 degrees Celsius and higher. The fire season started in August, when it typically starts in October, and there's a lot of fires happening now in September, with just this week 20 schools closed due to fire danger. Australia will be dealing with fire and extreme heat this season, so I one of the things that I'm most scared of is that we're going to see an absolute catastrophe. Now, for Australia, they could get lucky this season, but that impact will definitely happen the following summer season. So please, if you're in Australia, watch the live stream from 2 weeks ago that I did with Graham Tom, who is a firefighter of 41 years experience. He's a lovely man, and he took me through Australia's fire readiness for a hotter world. So the northern hemisphere summer has been horrific. 42 million acres have burned in Canada so far, and the heat in Phoenix, Arizona was 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43.3 degrees Celsius for 55 days. And that's another record. The burn units were full of people who had just basically fallen onto the hot surfaces, and temperatures on those surfaces were 180 degrees Fahrenheit. We saw heat extremes across Europe, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Southern Asia, Africa, China, the Middle East, and we still have no idea what the number of deaths are that are linked to heat. And it's something we might never know because it can often be attributed to things like heart attacks or strokes. More widely, we're going into the Antarctic summer, and it has seen a 1.5 million square kilometre loss of sea ice over the winter months, which means more ice loss will happen over the summer. And that means more heat will be absorbed into the oceans, and we already know that ocean heat is off the scale. So there's, some possibilities here that we might get lucky that could turn this around. A sizable volcanic eruption could send enough sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, combining with water to form sulfuric acid aerosols. These aerosols reflect incoming solar radiation, causing cooling of the Earth's surface. So that would be a relief and maybe give us some time to act. Another thing is the smoke from the fires can also change weather patterns. As Australia's last major bushfire did, it pushed the world into a La Nina. So there's lots of different possibilities in the mix. But for Australia and New Zealand in the summer, and then the global south from February onwards, when the hot season starts, we've got to get ready, and we're not ready. I've written 2 blogs about this. I've done a podcast. I've done some sort of shorter graphics. I'm very concerned that we're not paying attention to this risk. So that's what I thought I'd do a live stream, and I'm grateful to Bhavani for joining us. But Bhavani, from Malaysia, what's your experience been? You've gone through the wet bulb temperatures too. What's it been like for you?
I'm going to come back to the human factor. So I think there was a lot of fainting because of the weather. I believe there were also death because of dehydration. And my major concern is also the people who are working under the sun. We sort of have privilege to be within 4 closed walls with air condition, multiple supply of waters. But my concern always is, are employers looking into the welfare of people who are out in the field, the policemen, the traffic police, the people who are doing cleaning, construction, fishing, agriculture? Are they sufficiently prepared to be out in the heat?
Yeah.
So that's bothering me a lot.
Yeah, I agree. I saw one of the police boxes just near one of the major sort of roads in Phuket, and it's got a little police box with an air conditioning unit in it. So I hope that that's sort of happening at scale. So we've got Brigadier Sushil here, which is great. Great to have you. And they've come to a writer's block. So we're going to get stuck in. We've got nearly 50 tips. So we're going to just go as quickly as we can through it all. It's also written. It's on a podcast, and I'm going to put this up on the podcast. So I'm just doing whatever I can. We had Nisha Singh has translated it into Hindi. So if you are from a Hindi-speaking culture, please share it with your community. We're going to have it in Malay soon, and I'm hoping to get it in Thai as well. So just trying to get the word out. So number one, the first thing is take it seriously. I'm having lots of conversations with people about this. People are out doing extreme sports in this sort of heat, especially when the wet bulb temperatures kick in. You've got to take it seriously. So avoid being out in the highest temperatures of the day. Wear natural light fibers. Don't get sunburnt. Stay in the shade whenever you can. Drink lots of water and electrolytes as well. Avoid anything that dehydrates you. So coffee and alcohol, they both dehydrate you. And pay attention to how you're feeling. Learn what wet bulb temperatures mean, especially where you are. and know when it hits where you live. The governments are issuing warnings, but we've really got to educate ourselves about all of the different stages of heat stroke and what you need to do. Bhavani?
So when the heat hits, you know your home best, and you need to know the condition of your home. If your home environment is unsafe, get to an air conditioned space as quickly as possible and know where it is before the extremes hit. Now, don't forget to also check in on your family, community, especially those who are living alone, the elderly, those with pre existing medical conditions, pregnant women, and not to forget those who are single and living by themselves too.
Yeah, that's important because there have been a lot of people who have died because they are living alone. And of course, things like the floods are impacting them as well, right? So, all right, work options. So I think it's really important that we start discussing extreme heat with our workplaces. So we know that we can have flexible options when wet bulb temperatures hit, as well as rules in place if you work outside, which is something Bhavani mentioned before. If you are working in an essential role, get plans in place now on how you can do your job when the temperature spikes, because it is going to spike.
Now, this is important. Upgrade your air conditioner. Always make sure you have it serviced so that it's optimized. And if you're lucky enough to live in a home with air conditioning, please make sure it's running at maximum efficiency. Get it professionally cleaned every 3 months. And if you don't have one and can't afford it, install air. Oh, I mean, if you don't have one and
Yeah,
if you can afford it, install aircon in at least one room in your home, even if it's a rental. Buy the highest quality unit you can afford, as cheaper models actually release emissions. And
yeah.
please, service, take good care of it. It will do you good.
Yeah, we get ours chemically cleaned every 3 months, and that's from living in Singapore. So really making sure it's up to date. Absolutely. Landlords, invest in your properties. So I was speaking to my sister, and in Australia, landlords are not required to install air conditioning units in homes in some states. And we don't have time for the legislation to change this. So please do the right thing and put aircon units in your real estate homes. Invest in solar or wind energy as well, and make sure the insulation is top quality. And we heard in the UK they're not going to be forcing the landlords to do this. That just hurts the poorest people, because typically the people who are renting in most countries, not all countries, in Europe it's normal to rent, but you've got to help your renters get ready, especially if they are poor.
Now, do also identify a cool family space. Heat extremes cause high demand on the energy grid, and many people in the wealthy countries live in massive homes with multiple air conditioning units. So, this is really a good time to decide on a room or a small space in the house which is air conditioned that you can use as a family during heat extremes. This will help you reduce your personal demand on the grid, as well as the emissions you release from your air conditioning unit. And I think it's also good bonding time then.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to put all our mattresses in one room. That's my plan. Don't be selfish with your energy use. So we all need to be mindful of our energy consumption during heat extremes, which will also reduce our costs and leave enough so everyone gets the benefits of the air conditioning in extreme heat. Selfishness and taking too much energy for yourself, which has been reported in the US, means everyone will lose the critical ability to cool when the grid falls over. So don't be selfish.
Okay, and let's put some science to work. Paint it white. A quick and cost effective action is to paint our roofs white. Find the most reflective paint you can find and get to work painting roofs everywhere. Don't be hesitant. Don't forget to lay it on thick. For worker camps, refugee camps, indigenous villages, governments or the businesses are responsible for these camps, and you have to get them prepared. And look at shading and trees as well. So science a
Yeah,
little bit helps.
yeah, absolutely. And make it green. That's the next one. So according to the World Economic Forum, urban greening is a big opportunity, includes things like living walls, roofs, and green corridors. There's a fantastic article in the New York Times just in the last week talking about how Singapore has been basically building forests in the city to keep it cool. But, so this is an important focus because when water vapor is released by plants during photosynthesis, it helps to cool the environment in the immediate vicinity. So the difference in temperatures between those with mature trees and those without is significant at 10 degrees Celsius. So greening our communities is critical. So a couple of things here. The poorest neighbourhoods, even in wealthy countries, have significantly less trees or none. So if you're in a wealthy neighbourhood with lots of trees, get out into the poorer communities and start planting trees. And then in Asia, one of the fastest growing trees, because when we don't have time for mature trees before the heat hits, is bamboo. So you get out there and get your bamboo going, and then hopefully that will be enough to make a difference.
And I think it's time to take care of the poor and anyone struggling. As we are seeing across the world, the poorest are suffering, and we really need to focus on helping them prepare. And one of the things, if all of us chip in, just do what we can from where we are. And if you have wealth, invest in helping your community to get ready. And this includes things like accommodation to get out of the heat, or again, like you mentioned, planting trees in poorer neighborhoods because they often have few or no trees. So time to give back.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got wealth, and prepare cooling spaces now. So we must get community areas prepared in advance, and so they're called cooling spaces. So people have somewhere to go in extreme heat, and it needs to be available 24/7. In the US, they had cooling spaces in libraries, but they were closing at 5 o'clock. So they need to be open 24/7. We need to be thinking through what we need to do for those who can't help themselves, and it has to be a priority everywhere. And we must rethink our cities top to bottom. So get rid of anything that makes the heat worse. So that's the urban heat island effect. So we've got to be ripping up the tarmac and making sure and greening it up everywhere.
I'm going to come back again to homes or even maybe buildings and organizations. Close the curtains, install film on windows. If you have large windows, especially, and when the heat index starts moving past 50 degrees, keep your curtains closed. And if you haven't got curtains, this might be the time to invest in the highest quality you can afford. You can also place sun-resistant film on your windows to actually reduce heat impact in your home or the building that you are in.
Yeah, and if you can't afford to buy new curtains, go to the local secondhand shop. They've always got really great quality curtains. So just do what you can. Upgrade insulation. So make sure you have appropriate insulation in your roof and walls to keep your home cool inside and to stop the heat from coming in. Insulation also ensures that your air conditioner is more efficient, or if you paint your roof white, it will help it do the job better.
Now, this may sound petty, but this is so important. Andrea, especially in some parts of Malaysia where water may sound is readily available, but it may not be the case for everyone, please stock up on water. If your power grid goes down, do you lose water? Yes, we do. And if you're the same, stockpile enough water for your family for at least a week or not longer. Andrea, the state that I live in always has water cuts for days.
Yeah.
And so please also prepare sealed containers of water to be used to cool the body down. Now, one of the best ways to cool down is when options are limited is to soak towels in water and cover yourself with it. So especially my fellow Malaysians, and if you're in Selangor, you never know when your water is going to get cut. So yes, please always have water ready.
Yeah, it's really important. And the sealed comment is because obviously you don't want to attract mosquitoes breeding in the water. We're going to see an increase in dengue and malaria as well. This is something we've done. Invest in tools requiring no power. So whether it's handheld fans, lights, if the electricity goes out, or any device that can help you stay cool or safe, this is a great time to think about what you need when the power goes out and what could help you survive. So what can get you through? We've got these little tiny fans. We've also got these devices that they're called a neck air conditioner, where they blow cool air on your neck, and that helped us in the last wet bulb temperature moment. So battery-powered fans, hand crank generators for charging phones. And so what else? Just have a think about it. This is a really, really good time to reflect on what is necessary so that you can get prepared.
Andrea, you know something? The last time I lost power, I had to actually depend on my car to survive a while because that's the only place I could recharge my phone and keep myself cool. So thanks for
Yeah.
that tip. Now we've got a new enemy coming on, not a new, an old enemy that comes about whenever this happens, the mosquitoes. So we got to be mosquito smart. Now, El Nino brings an increase in infectious diseases from mosquitoes, especially dengue and malaria. Andrea just said that. Let's keep our homes clear of pools of water, which are mosquito breeding grounds, and really consider mosquito nets and other solutions. Talk to the government on how to protect its citizens from infectious disease and really educate citizens on preventing mosquitoes. Now, Singapore is excellent with this. Bring it up with your leaders and vote for action. And I just want to add on, while some fixtures at home are pretty cool, the fountains, water, and all of that, please make sure you are regularly checking them and making sure that it's not become home for the mosquitoes.
Yeah. I just was reading a couple of weeks ago, Bangladesh has been hit with its worst dengue season it's ever experienced. So this is a real thing. And we're also seeing things like dengue, malaria, and some other ones. I can't remember, one's gone off the top of my head, coming into the US and across Europe. So it's sort of spreading around the world as the earth warms. Plant a garden. Obviously, this will help from a green environment, but we are seeing widespread crop loss due to extreme heat and weather events, and it's becoming a growing concern around the world. So, as an example, rice production drops when temperatures pass 35 degrees Celsius, which we saw this happen this year. Rice crop production is down about 30% right across the rice growing regions in the world. So, crop losses obviously mean less produce making its way to the market, which is going to push up prices, and potentially it's going to lead to famine. So this is one of the big risks people are talking about. The two big risks people are talking about are heat and food availability. So plant a garden, make it a priority. Do it with your community. Do it if you live in a block of apartments. Get together and put a community garden together. Encouraging neighbours to do the same. You can all talk about what you can plant so you can share the produce with each other. Food shortages are getting worse and will continue to get worse. They're going to impact the poorest the most, as they always do. During the pandemic, I was watching a lot of local people fishing in the ocean and planting whatever they could, wherever they could, so that they could sustain themselves when there was no financing available. So any way we can be independent in the coming years will help us and our families survive.
Now, let's also talk about cooling it down outdoors. We really need cooling options that do not rely on electricity because cooling without power is much better for the environment, especially as many of the countries in the global south are powered by coal, and that's the dirtiest fossil fuel. But it's also about investing in solutions that work without power. One of the biggest challenges of extreme heat is once temperatures pass 50 degrees Celsius, power grid starts to fail due to the extreme temperatures and too much demand. And we've already seen this happen. So we really need to start thinking about alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably the thing that concerns me the most, the power grid failure. But two examples of outdoor cooling that I've been able to find that do not run on energy. One is
Mm-hmm.
called the Yanko Design Adiabatic Urban Cooling Bamboo. Just do a search for aircon bamboo, and it'll come up, or it's in the blog. And Cool Ants Beehive, which is from India, which is made of terracotta. So these solutions run on air and water. And what we need to be looking at solutions like this in workers' camps, Indigenous villages, refugee camps, slums, markets, at festivals, religious events, and so on, as well as the main areas where citizens and tourists gather in public places. So 100 people died in India during a religious festival. So we need to get these sort of systems put up in those sort of environments so that they have a chance of being able to survive those events.
And one of the inventions that actually could help is solar powered water mist fans. Now, these are industrial scale water mist fans, and it could be vital in cooling the skin in wet pulp temperatures. However, to ensure success, we would need to look at running these fans off independent solar panels so that they don't go down when the grid comes down.
Yeah,
So think
water,
about
water's
inventions like this. Yeah.
yeah. Um, communal cooling stations in cities. So we're talking about the cool spaces, but we need to establish cooling stations everywhere. So for cities, existing infrastructure like shopping malls, schools, libraries, or places of worship are options when the temperature is too hot to live. This plan definitely needs to be thought through, from setting up the space to providing water, food, and maybe even places to sleep.
And let me just go into the rural area, communal cooling stations in the rural areas. Now, outside of towns and cities, cooling stations need to be established in local villages and communities. So, what we can do is, really identify one or two places large enough for everyone as a local cooling station, and really put extensive forethought into planning these spaces to ensure that they're ready to receive the community when required, not as it happens, but it's already
Yeah.
there, which in many parts of the world is now. This can be a community led action. Cooling stations need to be accessible within a short distance, and it's supposed to be open 24/7.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm kind of really getting concerned about is our animal friends. And we can't forget the animals and wildlife, but for our pets and all the way to farm animals, how can we keep them safe? I was hearing, in Phoenix that, middle of the night, they're able to take their dogs outside for walks, right? Because the ground's too hot for their paws. So you want to protect your animals as well from the extreme heat. But how do we ensure that they survive these extreme temperatures? I've got some cows near me, and they've got basically a tin shed that goes over them where they can go for shade. Just like the workers' camps, this will be an oven and it will kill them really quickly. So how do we get prepared to keep our animals safe?
I spoke about human factor, right, Andrea? The other concern that I have is the wildlife. How do we protect the wildlife? Probably the biggest concern, because while we might be able to survive, what can we do for the wildlife? Can we set up spaces for birds and other wildlife with access to water, food, shade? Should we be thinking about mini ark-like structures to protect wildlife in our countries, regions, to give them a fighting chance? We must take care of our wildlife, or biodiversity loss and extinction will follow. The survival of this ecosystem is critical for human survival too. Can we plan to save enough? And Andrea, I think one of the things that kept coming up a lot when the heat struck us was, these animals are suffering. It's hot, and what do? They come out to the villages, to homes, to find an
Yeah,
escape. So
yeah,
while we want to be safe, it's not a very pleasant surprise to come back to see your house with uninvited visitors. As much as we love them, surprises may not be the most likable things at times.
yeah. Even the cobras might start coming in. I was
We've
talking to some.
had that. We've had,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same with we. But I had some friends. They work to save elephants, and I said to them, "How can we get somebody to communicate in local language with all the mullahs so that they can go out? They understand what are the tactics and strategies that they can use to keep the elephants safe in the extreme heat. So it's those sort of things. We've got to start preparing ahead, and then we've got to educate in local language to the people who are going to be in these situations, who may not know what's coming. Independent energy investment. So we've been talking about the grid a lot. So when the temperature gets too hot, high demand, as well as excessive heat, we'll see power grids fail. I was reading recently, South Australia and Victoria are both at risk of power grid failure. So we need to get ready. So if you have wealth, set up solar or wind energy for your property, and neither are perfect. Nothing is perfect. But if you can be independent of the grid, it means you're going to be taking less off the grid, but also because you're actually going to be able to keep yourself and your family safe. And then think of the community that you can invite into your home if the grid falls elsewhere.
so Andrea, when we speak about communities, right, the other thing that comes up is affordability. So we
Yeah.
also need to start thinking of independent energy for communities where it's really not affordable for some individuals to make investments in solar or wind energy. So come together and agree where you should set up independent energy sources and aircon units, ensuring there is enough to support everyone in the community. We do understand that sometimes affordability could be a question. We've got to be pragmatic about these issues. Now, this
Yeah.
will provide the whole community with a place to cool down, and it could save life. This is not the time to say that this is my space, that's your space. So,
Yeah.
if communities can fund this together, there's a greater chance of having it ready to go when higher temperatures hit. This is not an area to delay. We really need to start looking into this. And if you really have wealth, if you can do this, companies can come this to do a CSR, help the community make this investment, make this happen.
Yeah. I think one of the other things that we should really point out here is the attention is starting to go on the rise in air conditioning that the Global South is now investing in. 1.2 billion rural people are looking at buying their very first air conditioning units. And of course, what's available on the market, the cheaper it is, the more damage it does to the environment. So we need the manufacturers of these units to get them off the market because I think it's participating in ecocide and making sure that those communities have access to air conditioning that's affordable for them, but it's also not as damaging for the environment. But if they can focus on community, like one of the things that you learn, I was talking to Bhavani before, is that as a person, I grew up in Australia, so I'm used to hot weather but more dry, whereas in Asia it's hot weather and it's more there's more moisture in the air, right? This last April, so February to April, I saw a lot of people from this region really struggling with heat for the first time. So when people in this region are struggling with heat, you know that we've got a problem. It's a lot hotter. So yeah, sports, festivals, play. I was talking about the religious ceremony in India where 100 people died, but for political rallies, religious ceremonies, or even large-scale sporting events, if the wet bulb temperature or heat index has been exceeded, it is in the interest of the organisers to either cancel these events or where possible, move them indoors, which is obviously a bit harder with the populations in this region, but to an air-conditioned venue. Painting roofs white, green roofs, outdoor cooling devices, trees and shade. These are all important areas to focus on for civic and institutional buildings.
And Andrea, to follow that up closely, it's also time to cancel events in extreme heat. So please pay attention to extreme heat if you happen to organize any outdoor activity, because ignoring wet bulb temperatures really puts lives at risk. Dehydration situations are real, it does cause death. If you want to survive, learn what you need to do and make sure you share this with family and the wider community in general.
Yeah, I heard a story in the US. There was a lady who was a teacher at a different school to her son. She cancelled the sporting events and the outdoor activities, and in the other school they didn't, and her son died from heat extremes. So it's really important we pay attention and take it seriously. Like none of us are invincible. Even if you're healthy, young,
Yes.
fit, within 6 hours you can die in extreme wet bulb temperatures. School preparation, I've got two boys at school, so this is something that's front of mind for me. Schools have got to start being aware of wet bulb temperatures and make sure students are not out in this heat for extended periods of time. We're seeing some really interesting ideas happening in the US after their recent heat extremes, so take some inspiration from them. Classrooms in the affected regions must prioritise installing air conditioning, which isn't the norm in public schools across the region. If possible, as well as independent energy sources like solar to keep the students safe. Schools can become cooling spaces for the community as well. So if you're in a schooling district, even a public schooling area, and there's wealth in your community, invest in solar for the school so that the governments can spend their budgets on putting solar and air conditioning into the poorer communities where the communities can't afford to do that.
Now, this is something that perhaps is close to home. Embrace traditional cooling architecture, and this is something I remember from childhood. We really need to rethink how we build for the future we have coming and to embrace techniques of the past, repairing what we have broken. Now, there's something called Peranakan architecture, which is a feature of the West Coast or Southeast Asia, which keep towns cool and air circulating before electricity was even invented. Today, many of the features have been altered, such as the arches between buildings blocked and covered over. We need to reverse this, and we really need to look at installing shade in public areas everywhere. Trees and plants are critical too. And Andrea, as a child, I wasn't traveling much, so I can't remember how houses in other countries were. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember growing up, my grandparents' place. at the wall there used to be this, it had holes so that air can circulate. So I'm not sure
Mm.
whether other homes in other countries actually had that, but I remember growing up in homes like that where walls had tiny tiny holes, literally holes,
Mm.
for air to pass through in and out of the house, high
So
up at.
yeah, my first experience with Peranakan architecture was in Malacca in Malaysia. It's one of my favorite
Yeah.
places. I love it. And, it was the first time in the houses, just the way they're designed. So the air sort of moves through the houses, but also in the streets. So in Phuket town, it's also got Peranakan architecture.
Mhm.
And one of the features of these big archways between all of the buildings so that the air flows all the way through, depending on which way the breeze is going. And a lot of the shops have sort of blocked them with clothes, and shops are moving onto the streets and all that sort of stuff. So we really need to reverse that to keep that air circulating. I also recently saw these sort of sails that you can sort of put across between buildings where you can grow vegetation. So we need more shade. We need to do a lot, but I think there's so much wisdom in the ancients, about how.
I remember we used to have high ceilings with bamboos as
Mm,
arch those days.
yeah, right, nice. Yeah, so we can go back. I mean, it's not the only answer, but definitely.
One of
So, rethinking outdoor work, and this is really important. So, most people that will be impacted by the intense wet bulb temperatures are outdoor workers, and these are typically the people responsible for feeding, building, and entertaining the world. They are also the least influential and will work regardless because they have to have no choice. I was watching interviews with people on the Greek islands experiencing these terrible, terrible temperatures, and they had no choice but to keep working, and they're risking their lives by doing it. So we need to rethink hours of work to ensure that they can escape the heat, as well as plan for cooler places that they can go to when the temperatures are too high.
Now, I think I mentioned this before. Business owners are responsible, and I think in general that means employers. Business owners must be made responsible for ensuring the safety of workers in heat extremes, which is not something that happens everywhere, especially when the workers are foreign or undocumented migrants. Severe penalties should be put in place for lack of care for workers' well-being. Now, the sort of work that gets impacted are agriculture, farming, construction, transportation, especially if motorbikes are the primary vehicle. Grab drivers, postmen, tourism vehicles like tuk-tuks. We've seen delivery drivers die in the US this summer. Outdoor markets, from fruit and vegetable, seafood to clothes to tourism, gardeners and outdoor domestic workers, hospitality employees with primary roles outdoors. And this includes restaurant staff, the tourism sector such as golf caddies, diving instructors, water sports touts, and more. Emergency services workers. So really, employers and HR really need to step in at this point and relook at safety. I mean, I would include this in safety of workers who are outdoors at all times.
And I think a lot of people would be quite shocked about how the people in this community are treated right across the global south. There's not a lot of respect for those sort of people. And if we want to change and bring our world back into balance, addressing that is a big part of it. So humanity is required. And, these are the people who've built our world, and they're the poorest. They're in the worst conditions, and those conditions are not survivable for the extreme weather that we've got, not just the heat, floods, fires, you name it. So it's time for humanity. All right, infrastructure meltdown. So our infrastructure is not ready for extreme heat, especially here, and it's going to be a huge challenge in the global south because most of the electrical infrastructure is still above ground, because obviously it's cheaper than installing it underground. We've seen some of the infrastructure melt. It literally melts in the heat in countries like India, and it's coming for all of us. So it's at higher risk of collapsing due to the heat and getting damaged by things like storms. And that will be, in extreme heat, it'll be impossible for the emergency services workers to get out and to repair it because it'll be too hot. So it's a bit of an issue that we need, and we're not ready. And it's a critical measure that we need to be investing in this infrastructure now to ensure it is suitable for higher temperatures and other weather extremes. I fear that there's no way that we're going to have it ready for this next round of heat. But in the following year, it's probably going to be even hotter. So we've got to do it. And we saw this in Italy this year in Rhodes, not in Rhodes, Greek island, I think. Their electricity grid fell over, and it's under the ground. And the ground got too hot, and the grid collapsed. So we've got it all above the ground. And that's one of the reasons that I really want to encourage everyone to look into the independent energy sources available to you. They are imperfect, but if you're only going to rely on the grid, you could find yourself in real trouble if the grid falls over.
And I have a question for everyone. What does overheated infrastructure look like? So it's really in our interest to think through what extreme heat means to us. And one example is when roads starts to melt. We really would not be able to leave our homes. And if we can't leave our homes, what does that mean? Especially if you consider food, water supplies, medical emergencies, and so on. So really speak and raise this up with your government. Get your community prepared with this.
Yeah. So my husband's an engineer, and I was talking to him about at what point do the roads start to melt? And it's different in every country depending on the infrastructure and how it's been built. But even knowing when you're at what level your roads have been built, because if you can't get out on the road, what does that mean to you? What's going to be the impact? Emergency services preparedness. So we absolutely have to consider the ability of emergency services personnel to get infrastructure working in intense heat. At the peak of temperatures, will they even be able to drive, especially if the roads start melting? But it's also not just that. Their vehicles might overheat. And if they can't get to the areas, or if they can get to the areas, what sort of clothing will they require, such as cooling suits? Have they got them already? We need to prepare for this now. In the US, the burn units were overflowing with 2nd and 3rd degree burns this summer because the ground is so hot. And like I said, it's up to 180 degrees Fahrenheit, which is almost the temperature of boiling water. And the medics are also experiencing severe burns on their knees while tending to patients. So we need to get our emergency services teams prepared. And I don't think we are. And look, the other thing is, how they dress. Can they get out? I mean, what's that going to be? What's that impact going to be on us?
And now I just want to go into car and motorbike parking shelter. The intense heat in 2023 has left cars and motorbikes literally cooking under the sun. And for those without air conditioning in cars, not being able to park in shaded areas, this will become a major issue. You cannot cool a car down if it doesn't have air conditioning when it has been exposed to this level of heat. Therefore, it's really time to install parking shelters everywhere, which is not a general practice in the developing world. I've seen a lot of open car parks here, and truthfully, Andrea, when it's so hot, sometimes I just take Grab because I know my car's going to be left in the hot sun for hours, and it's going to be a struggle for me. So I just take the Grab. Not
Yeah,
the
right.
not the most best thing to do, but I'm afraid of the heat, so I just take
Yeah,
Grab, so I don't have to go back to a cooking car.
yeah. Well, I grew up in Australia, and in the summertime, I remember when we didn't have air conditioning as a general principle in our cars, you couldn't touch the steering wheel, and if you had leather seats, it would burn your bum. So, and now it's even hotter now. So, I think it's a really important thing that we have to do. And motorbikes are even worse. I spent a lot of time at the hospital with my husband this year, and there's thousands of motorbikes just sitting in the sun. So how do they even get on the bikes without burning themselves? So the other thing is, let's make these parking shelters solar sources. So we have a great opportunity to learn and take inspiration from countries like France, which is installing solar panels on the roofs of all large car parks. For hospitals across the region, installing solar panels on the roofs, panels on car park and motorbike channels could actually provide energy for the hospital and the surrounding community.
And I think also let's talk about securing health services. Now, what's more important than healthcare services? How do we really ensure that it continues to run? We're already seeing hospitals overrun in wealthy countries suffering heat extremes. And how can developing countries prepare? First up, we need to focus on independent and sustainable energy supplies that are powerful enough to run whole facilities such as hospitals and all emergency services providers.
Yeah. So because I spent a lot of time in the hospital, we had a couple of electricity outings, and that was kind of like, whoa. Now, my husband wasn't on machines that if they had it turned off, he would have died. But, I'm sure there were people. So here's the challenge. Energy sources currently in use, firstly, are the electrical grids, which we've discussed are at risk of breaking down, followed by generators running on fossil fuels. So I asked the question, when does it get too hot to run a generator? And apparently that number is anywhere from 40 degrees Celsius. So the heat and humidity combination is lethal for the generators. And if that's what they're sort of relying on, we could be in trouble.
And I think we also need to stock up, and we need to ensure that there is enough medication, food, and water to get through any extended heat wave. And here's the important thing, it's also crucial that we have enough staff to deal with surges. So we're not only stocking up on food, medication, and all of that, but I think in literal sense, we need to stock up and make sure we have backup medical staff on hand. So the question to ask is, will the current infrastructure work in the heat predicted by climate scientists? Are we prepared for all eventualities when we face an extended heat event?
Yeah. And from all I'm saying, no, we're not. Localized medical facilities. Another consideration is the number of people needing medical care will explode, as we saw in the Northern Hemisphere. But equally, if people can't get to medical centres, so the car's too hot to start, undrivable roads, or if they're too far away when minutes are precious in an emergency, especially if you're moving into stage 3 heat stroke, we need to plan how we deal with that. So let's get ready and set up local services. So I'll start with the first one and we'll take it in turn. So we need to agree the equipment that is required for heat emergencies, as well as how we train local community members to deliver emergency medical care in situations where getting to hospital or clinics isn't possible. And if we want to get it prepared, we need to identify the number of communities in each country. Bhavani?
We need to nominate people to be trained by medical professionals in heat stroke care and educate the community that this is where everyone suffering or anyone suffering heat stroke should first come.
We need to determine what equipment, medication is needed in each facility and start getting stockpiles in place and secured.
Install independent energy sources so these local facilities can be successful no matter how hot it gets.
We need to set these facilities up now in advance of when it's needed, not wait for it to happen.
And invest in body bags, because as we have seen in the US, when packed with ice, it has been successful in cooling down patients who have moved into the deadly heat stroke stage. We need to stock up in advance and ensure ice supplies as well as freezers independent of the grid.
Yeah.
Invest in that.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting insight out of the US, the body bags. Another thing is prepare survival packs with items like electrolytes and also information, and distribute it to the citizens before the heat arrives.
And I think it's also a good time to invest in medical teams producing how-to videos in local language about how to handle a wet bulb temperature emergency and the signs to look out for.
Yeah, so when you did the translation, were you able to find local language talking about wet bulb temperatures and dealing with heat stroke? I bet you it was really hard. Yeah,
very little.
Even in English, it's hard, and some of the videos are like 5-10 years old. So the information isn't out there. So I think that's a really good thing to do. The media. So they absolutely must start reporting on wet bulb temperatures or the heat index and educate their readers and viewers about what it means. It needs relentless attention, especially in this part of the world, to increase awareness of risks, as well as guidance of what will happen due to the confirmed El Nino, which is expected to see temperatures we've never seen before. The media must provide up-to-date current information, predictions, and education on how to handle extreme heat, and it must prioritise this message. It is time to put wet bulb temperatures with danger categories on the front page of every media and communicate at the right level of intensity. And this isn't happening yet.
And my dear influencers, Use your profile for good and take on the role of educating your audience and contributing to this conversation. Anyone with influence can be an educator today. And I just would like to add on to this. Please get your facts, your information right, because your word has power and people believe in that power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And be appropriate for the time. If your community is suffering and you're still bouncing around on a beach with a big smile on your face, it might not be in alignment with what your viewers are feeling right now.
Appropriate.
Government leadership. I think it's time for the governments to call their citizens together, speak honestly and openly about what is happening and what is expected, with words guided by science. And there's many countries in this part of the world that do that. Countries like Singapore are really honest about what's going on, and I think it's an opportunity for our leaders of the world to stand up and really, be in this time, be in this moment, and be the leader the world needs right now. We need all government leaders to set in place plans that are aligned with climate scientists and what they're predicting and communicating, and we need to start adapting now. I'm so frustrated by the lack of adaptation all over the world, because extreme climate events keep putting everyone on their back foot, and we need to start getting onto the front foot, because when we react after the disaster's already hit, what's the point, right? We know what's coming. That scientists have been telling us for decades what's coming. We're here. It's accelerated. We've got to accelerate the action. But I think real honesty from governments and real spending on what needs to be spent on to get the communities prepared. Because like we're seeing in Libya, if you don't do it, the rage of the citizens will certainly follow.
And I think this is where transparency is critical, openness and engagement with citizens too. And corruption is another area that must be addressed and tackled. Governments must also walk across borders for the good of the region and share best practices, help solve challenges that contribute to the crisis, like the haze, and rapidly reduce fossil fuels, especially coal, or this will keep getting worse. So please vote for leaders who will act on the polycrisis denialists, which will kill you and your family. So you got to put an ear to the ground and really see and have a touch on the pulse to know what's really happening.
Yeah. And politicians who care as well, right? We're seeing the big show going on in the US. It's like, when are they going to actually govern? But anyway, communication is critical. So governments must put in place now national communications plans, and they've got to set up the system for the communication to ensure it reaches everyone under their care. They've got to put in place a team to manage this and get prepared before the next emergency strikes. I think we're going to talk about it. We've seen so many communication failures. So national and local communication will be vital.
So I think while we are in the era of digitalization and everything going digital, technology taking on another pace, we really need to still think about communicating at a low tech level. Millions of people still do not have access to digital technology. And this is something we saw during the pandemic. Even in wealthy countries, in Maui, Hawaii, communication was a failure because nothing worked anymore. In Libya, there was no warning at all. All communities need to consider communication, such as public screens, notice board with extreme temperature alerts, so everyone is aware of the risk. Local media must share this information too. So really think about how do we ensure everyone gets the information no matter where they are, and we really need to push for this to happen.
Yeah, and different types of alarms. Like one of the reasons in Maui why they didn't issue the alarm is because it was for a tsunami, and they were worried that everyone would run away from the water towards the fire. And there's a lot of anger and criticism, and I think a lot of mistakes will be made. But I think really thinking through what systems we need in place and how do we communicate, because we're talking about the grid falling over. That also means telecommunications. So if you can't communicate through mobile phones, and that's the only one you're relying on, then what's going to happen. So really need to start thinking about this and getting in place. And even if they put these big sort of what do you call those speakers up all over the place, are they going to survive the heat? if a heat extreme hits. So really thinking it through is important. For business, executive leadership teams must start to look at all possibilities and understand the impact on their business and not just the bottom line. So I'll just start with the first example. If you're a large global corporation, you might have thousands of employees impacted by heat, and you've probably already experienced this. So how can you help them? How can you help them get prepared? Can you help install solar or wind so their families are safe during extreme heat? What working practice and expectations will you put in place? Communicate up front. That's really important.
Now, is your supply chain safe, or will it buckle in the heat as we saw it happen in China in 2022? What's the impact of that? How can you really prepare your business when it comes to
Yeah.
supply chain?
Yeah, and that's important for all of us. It might not seem, but when the supply chains are down, then what we have access to is down as well. If tourism is your business, so I'm living in Phuket and tourism is massive, and heat waves are start killing people, this is not going to attract tourists to your destination. So how are you preparing for this heat? And what are you doing for your employees? How are you planning to communicate with your guests? Are you setting up cooling spaces for your outdoor workers and making it possible for them to survive?
Now, more broadly for outdoor sectors such as agriculture, transportation, and tourism, your businesses will be severely impacted by the situation at multiple levels: crop loss, drought, temperatures too hot for your employees to work in. What can you do now to prepare? What infrastructure can you put in place? How can you change working hours to stay productive and keep your employees safe?
Yeah. And for any business that's relying on migrant labor or undocumented labor, and there's a lot of that in this part of the world, as I said earlier, this is a time for humanity. Take care of your people. We saw it during the pandemic. There were some business owners did an amazing job for their people, and other people left them in really desperate situations. So get their home camps in order so that they have a chance of surviving. Don't make them work and live in wet bulb temperatures because they're going to die, especially the hotter it gets. Secure their food and water supplies, install cooling stations, and change the hours of work as you see fit.
Everything, everywhere, all at once. While we urgently need to get prepared for extreme heat, at the same time, we must address the destruction of the natural world. And that really requires investing our energy and investments into turning around the destruction we have caused, which is making the climate emergency worse. And the reason we are dealing with this extreme weather. Antonio Guterres, head of the United Nations, said, "We need everything, everywhere, all at once." So it's time for our communities to come together everywhere and work out how do we replenish and rewild the land we call home, clean it up, bring it back to life, stop the human sprawl, limit developments not in alignment with nature, etc. And all at the same time while preparing for hotter and hotter temperatures at the same time.
Yeah, I love Antonio Guterres. His latest, he's always got these great one-liners. I'd like to meet his communication team because I think they're very talented. But his latest is, "We've opened the gates of hell." So it's critical that we act everywhere, and it's time to get to work to see if we can partner with nature to lessen the impact of the escalating climate emergency. In parallel, to deal with wet bulb temperatures, let's rewild our environments as quickly as possible.
And if we're by the ocean, we need to work out the best techniques that will contribute to emission reductions and other benefits such as seagrass meadows, mangroves, oysters, repopulating important species, and so on.
On the land, it's trees, plants, animals, and more. Let's ask our village elders or local Indigenous communities for guidance on returning our environments to nature everywhere. And we should look back at least 50 years for inspiration.
And let's clean up the waste and work out how to ensure a clean environment. Banning all single use plastics, setting up effective waste collection, composting. It's a little things. Plastic waste also blocks drains and massively increases flood risk. I've been a victim of that, so I know that very well. And
Yeah.
there's really a huge benefit to cleaning up our environments, and just start with your neighborhood friendly drains.
Yeah. No, and so I was reading that There was a study done in India when they're blocked with plastics, the flood risk is actually elevated by 1 metre. So it's a significant thing. So cleaning up the drains, and we saw that last October as well. Blocked drains. People just hadn't been paying attention to what was going on. Across the global south, the waterways and lands are covered in trash. And this waste is not just domestic, as Western countries have been shipping waste to this region for decades. And I just heard that Australia is going to start doing it again, which is very, very, very disappointing. This practice, it's just got to stop. It's called waste colonialism. Or if you're going to do it, invest in the infrastructure, like similar to what Singapore's got. They've got this incredible incinerator infrastructure set up, which also, I believe, doesn't release emissions. We need, like, for every 5 million people, we need to put that sort of infrastructure in. We've got to do something to address this mega crisis.
And that also comes to the never-ending buildup of all waste, as well as overdevelopment, poor planning, etc. I mean, water supplies across the world, but especially in the global south, are polluted and undrinkable. More alarming, in a world rapidly heading towards water shortages, prioritizing cleaning and reinvigorating waterways must be a priority for all countries.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? So finally, get your home in. Oh, it's not. I've got two more. Finally, get your home in order to keep your family safe. Check on your community and ensure everyone is prepared. And then come together and make sure the poorest in your village, town, or city can survive extreme heat by putting in place the infrastructure and solutions necessary for those who cannot afford to do it itself. I was reading a very interesting article from Phoenix right when they're in the middle of the heat extreme. It started in the tent cities, but these people just went through the worst possible time. And then they went to a suburban house where there's a young couple with a dog, no children. They're in their home all day in the air conditioning, trying to work out when they can go out and walk their dog. And they were completely oblivious to the suffering of these people living in these tent cities. So, if we want to overcome what the biggest fight of our lives, humanity's got to be at the heart of what we do, and we've got to take care of each other. I just really think it's important. Bhavani, the final one?
For the Southern Hemisphere, the time for rapid action and adaptation measures are now. We've had the warning from the Northern Hemisphere. Let's make sure we heed it. And I just want to round it up by just saying this. It's about humanity, and it's about us. It's on us to restore what has happened. And if all of us can just do 1% extra, just 1%, collectively, that will amount to a lot. And if we can just start doing that, it will make a difference. In Malay, there is a proverb, sedikit-sedikit lama-lama jadi bukit. And if I translate that, what it literally means is, a little by a little, it will amount up to hills and mountains. So let's just start. Let's just do 1% extra than what we have been doing or not been doing. And collectively, it will matter.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And we've got to do this. We have an opportunity to actually revolutionize humanity. And actually, that's the only way that we're going to be able to do it. When Antonio Guterres said we've opened the gates of hell, I'm looking at the heat extremes. They're actually predicting 2.3 degrees Celsius warming. We experience 1.5 in the Northern Hemisphere summer. It's not embedded, it's not permanent. But in the Southern Hemisphere summer, they're predicting 2.3 degrees Celsius warming. And I'm reading that and just like, that's the Great Barrier Reef gone. It's probably the coral reefs across the whole Asia-Pacific region gone, across the whole global south, which would have devastating consequences. So we really are out of time. We've got so much work to do. If you have wealth, there is no point holding on to your wealth if we really have opened the gates of hell. So invest your wealth in getting the bioregions restored. There's a great site called One Earth. They've talked about that. We've got the 9 planetary boundaries. We've crossed 6 of them. Can you put wealth towards helping to recover those 6 boundaries and making sure we don't cover past the next 3 so that we've crossed all 9? We've gone too far. We need to pull it back. We can do it. I believe that the power in our earth, in our world now, is in the middle class. There's 3.8 billion middle class people in the world. We've got to come together in all corners of the world, in every language, every culture, every faith. We've got to come together and say, enough. too many clowns at the top. You know, some of the stuff that we're seeing from our political and business and media and social media leaders is ridiculous. So it's time to move. What do you reckon, Bhavani? Can we do it? Have you got faith?
I've got faith if everyone just starts paying attention to it and not think that it's other people's job. It's not their job. That someone is appointed to do it, and we can't just depend on someone to do it. It's on us.
Yeah, I agree. So we've got to shrink our lives, shrink our impact on Earth. We've got to put any wealth out into the world to help regenerate the world, and we've got to keep believing that we can do this. We might fail,
Yes,
but I think if we fail while we work together, it's going to be a better collapse than if we fail and don't do anything at all, because I think it's just going to be really ugly.
I think it's better that we try and attempt something rather than not doing and wonder whether it will work.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bhavani, thank you so much for joining me. Look, I hope everyone got something out of it. You know, I've been talking about this for a while. I really want people to start paying attention to it. If you've listened and you've gained something from it, please share it. You know, this isn't for us. We're not doing this for any reason or any ego. We just want everyone to know, talk in local language to your community. That's the most important thing. Get people prepared, take care of the poor. We're coming up to some really severe heat extremes. We need to get prepared for it, and we're not. And that's why we wanted to do this today. So, Bhavani, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Andrea, can I just say one last thing? If you're not doing this for the world, do it for your loved ones.
Yeah. We've got to take care of each other.
Yep.
You've got to. All right. So thank you, darling. And the No Show is happening next Friday. And then the week after that, I've got some Australian mates coming to join me. And we're going to talk about The Voice and what the hell is going on in Australia, because it must be very confusing for a lot of people hearing the discussion that's taking place. So we're going to get to the bottom of that. But follow Bhavani. She's a champion. She's a great lady, and she cares, and I love her. So thanks, everyone, and have a great weekend.
Thank you, Andrea. See you guys.
All right. Bye.